You know, one cool thing about the new Superman movie is that DC has also already been producing a really good modern Superman animated series, with the third season of My Adventures with Superman set to release sometime later this year. This is kind of a big deal, since the last time that we saw a big budget Superman movie debut alongside an animated series was in 2006 when Superman Returns came out, and shortly after its release, Kids WB started airing Legion of Superheroes, which is, in my opinion, one of the most underrated comic book shows from the 2000s. The series' blend of comedy, action, and sci-fi with a young team dynamic made it really stand out when compared to other similar shows, with it being lighthearted and fun while also not shying away from delving into more serious or dramatic themes, and it managed to tell some great stories during its 26-episode run. It had a really good first season, a fantastic second season that improved on all aspects of the show, leaving us with a really promising setup for season 3, and then it was cancelled, as we've already seen happen with many other shows that deserve to continue. And this is why in this video, I'd like to take a look back on this often overlooked animated series, since, while it might not be as popular as other action cartoons, it's still very fondly remembered by those who grew up watching it, and it served as many fans' first impression of the Legion of Superheroes as a concept. So let's take a look at this show's very interesting production history and see what would have happened during season 3 had the show continued. Legion of Superheroes started airing on the Kids WB programming block on September 2006, being mainly produced by Linda M. Steiner and James Tucker, who already had years of experience working on previous DC animated shows, and would later go on to serve as showrunner and producer for Batman the Brave and the Bold. Much like The Brave and the Bold, Legion of Superheroes is a very light-hearted comedic action show that loves to explore both the more outlandish and eccentric side of the team's mythos, as well as exploring more mature themes and serious storylines. As previously mentioned, it started development so that it could tie in with the release of Superman Returns. Warner Bros. Wanted to create a new animated series that could mostly appeal to a younger demographic, taking inspiration from the Superboy comics where he regularly had adventures with the Legion during the Silver Age. This series is also completely unrelated to any other DC continuity, including the DCAU. Some of you might remember an episode from Justice League Unlimited titled Far From Home, in which Supergirl travels to the 31st century and meets the Legion. Throughout the years, I heard many times that this episode was actually meant to be a backdoor pilot for a possible show on the Legion of Superheroes, but that's just not true. During an interview with World's Finest, James Tucker clarified the situation by stating that this series was never tied to JLU in any way, and that Supergirl was never meant to originally appear on the show. It was conceived entirely as its own thing. They intended to create a standalone series that was meant to serve as an easy introduction to the Legion of Superheroes for a general audience, and in that regard it really succeeded. When you think about it, it's sort of a combination between Justice League and Teen Titans, since the Legion are a team of young teenage heroes that deal with very high-level threats. They're like the Titans but with Justice League-scale stories, constantly having to save entire planets and even the universe from time to time. Another cool thing about the show were its cameos and Easter eggs. During season 1, for example, Booster Gold appeared as a janitor. And there were also cameos from Crypto and Streaky. Even Lobo briefly showed up, although it would have been cool if he was used for a bigger role than just a cameo. The episode's storylines could range from being light-hearted adventures to being far darker and dramatic, with season 1 being mostly lighter and season 2 being a lot darker in tone. Tucker has previously said that they viewed the transition in tone from season 1 to season 2 as being like the transition from the Silver Age to the Bronze Age. But even with its first season being mostly lighthearted, they still made sure to flesh out their characters and address some deeper subjects, like Timberwolf being tortured and genetically altered into becoming a beast by his own father, or Brainiac 5 being injured in battle right after Superman ignored his call for help. And even when they chose to focus on comedy, they used its lighthearted tone really well. The episode about the Substitute League is a really campy, silly story, but it's arguably the best episode of the season. It was just a really fun idea, executed very competently. While the series started out with a more hopeful, adventurous tone, this would rapidly change once its fantastic second season came around. This honestly might be one of the greatest jumps in quality from season to season in any animated show. The first season was good, but season 2 was great. It had a general darker tone and the storylines carried more dramatic weight, with heavier stakes that made our characters go through meaningful developments. A big reason why the episodes from season 2 feel more compelling when compared to those from season 1 is because it carries an overarching storyline that allowed the writers to delve into more complex storytelling. In season 1, the only episode that felt truly eventful was the two-parter finale, given that the Sun Eater provided a universal thread that upped the stakes. In season 2 though, the main story arc revolves around the arrival of Imperiex, an incredibly powerful alien conqueror from the 41st century, responsible for destroying the universe in the future, and his threat is present throughout every single episode of the season, and this provided the show an opportunity to place our main characters into tougher, more dramatic situations that made them grow, like how they explored Lightning Lad's backstory and the apparent death of his little sister, Timberwolf being framed for killing his father, a part of Triplicate Girl dying on a mission, or Superman X's robot parents dying on the very first episode of the season. Oh yeah, we gotta talk about Superman X, or Kal-El, who's easily one of the coolest original characters ever created for any Marvel or DC show. He's a really awesome character, an anti-hero Superman that slowly learns to be more selfless and altruistic as the story progresses. During that old interview with James Tucker that we previously discussed, he said that for season 2, the network wanted a more badass version of Superman. They first considered introducing Mon-El, but the network felt like he wouldn't have been too different enough when compared to Clark Kent, since they wanted someone who'd basically be the opposite of our traditional Superman. And the writers also didn't want to completely change Mon-El's personality from the comics just to appease network executives. And this is when they thought of making a clone of Superman from a dark future, who has to go back in time to ask the Legion for help. Basically an inverse of season 1 where Superman had to travel forward in time to help the Legion. Another interesting fact is that there's also concept art showing how Mon-El would have looked like had he showed up on the series. It would have been awesome to see them eventually using him and maybe the Daxamites as well. Besides that Mon-El concept art, we also have some early designs for characters that ended up having a different appearance on the final show. Brainiac 5, for example, originally had a much greener design, and Lightning Lad almost had blonde hair. Now, the most memorable aspect of the show's second season, by far, was Brainiac 5 turning evil and being gradually consumed by the dark influence of the original Brainiac. Season 1 only alluded to Brainiac 5's connection with the original evil Brainiac, but throughout Season 2 it was a storyline that developed in the background, with Episode 8 being the first episode that introduced Brainiac 1 and his intention to corrupt Brainiac 5. Brainy purposefully kept secrets from Clark and the entire Legion, not only to prevent Superman from learning information that could alter his timeline, but also to protect himself from being judged because of his ancestors' past actions. It was a twist that had plenty of foreshadowing and good setup, serving as a nice resolution to Brainy's personal character arc and internal conflict. The two-parter season finale also had plenty of amazing moments, like Brainiac killing Imperiex, or Superman and Kal-El fusing together during the final battle, which was just insane, and a really nice nod to the comic book storyline Superman Red and Superman Blue. Of course, what most people remember from the finale was the last cliffhanger which capped off the entire series, teasing the return of Brainiac in a new evolved form.
Evil does not die. It evolves.
This gave us a really interesting setup for what could have been an amazing Season 3, but it unfortunately just wasn't meant to be. Legion of Superheroes lasted until 2008, which was the same year that the Kids WB programming block was cancelled and stopped airing on the CW. And while there were rumors that either Cartoon Network or 4Kids Entertainment might have been interested in picking up the series, it was still ultimately cancelled, despite the show being a relative success in ratings and being well received by both fans and critics alike. Another possibility that might have contributed to the show not getting renewed is that maybe its merchandise and toy sales just weren't strong enough for it to justify another network picking up the series, since that was a pretty common reason for action cartoons to get cancelled back then. Still though, despite the show being terminated before its time, over the years we found out different details about their plans for Season 3. During an interview with CBR, James Tucker said that the main storyline during the third season would have revolved around the ramifications of Brainiac 5 turning to the dark side, him gaining the trust of his teammates again, and the coming threat of the new evil Brainiac 6. He also mentioned that they wanted to introduce Wildfire and Dawnstar as new members to the Legion, with Wildfire being used as Kal-El's replacement, being the new mysterious member of the group. There were plans to have new episodes focusing on obscure Legionnaires that didn't get much time to shine before, such as Block, and Tucker specifically mentioned that they wanted to make an episode showing the twin brother of Ferrolad. Ferrolad did have a twin brother in the comics who had his same exact power set, and this idea seems like it would have been an adaptation of Adventure Comics number 357, titled The Ghost of Ferrolad, that showed how the Legionnaires dealt with Ferrolad's death and their guilt for letting him sacrifice himself to save them, with Ferrolad reappearing as a ghost in the story. During another interview, Tucker also mentioned that they intended to introduce Shadowlass into the Legion during Season 3, and we actually do have concept art that depicts how she would have looked like in the show's style. Also, while not directly confirming that this was something they planned on doing, Tucker did mention that he believed the Great Darkness saga would be a great story to adapt for a direct-to-video movie, and he's absolutely right. That's probably one of, if not the most iconic storyline from the Legion's comics, and it would be great to see it get adapted in animated form. Now, those were all planned Season 3 ideas that came directly from the series showrunner, but there are other characters that have been rumored and speculated that could have potentially shown up had the show continued, such as Censor, Magnetic Kid, Tellus, Princess Projectra, and even Supergirl, but we don't have a direct quote from a series staff member to fully confirm this. It's truly a shame that the show ended up being so short-lived. The Legion of Superheroes are one of the most underrated superhero groups from the DCU, and even though they have had appearances throughout other DC shows, this 2006 series still stands as the only time we've seen a solo show that completely focuses on the Legion. Although there have been other attempts, in 2019 DC relaunched the Legion's comic book title with Brian Michael Bendis as its writer. And a couple years later in 2021, multiple news sites announced that Warner was working on developing a new adult animated series based on the Legion, with plans to release it for HBO Max and having heavy involvement from Brian Michael Bendis, with him later sharing a page of the script for the series pilot. This, however, ended up leading nowhere, and we haven't gotten any further reports on this proposed series since then. We did get to see a Legion of Superheroes animated movie in 2023 though, set in the Tomorrowverse continuity, so maybe that idea for a new animated series eventually morphed into an animated movie instead, but that's just speculation. Even though the 2006 cartoon still stands as the only time the Legion has gotten their very own series, I still really appreciate the fact that it managed to be so good despite it not getting many episodes to fully flesh out their ideas. It introduced the Legion to an entire generation of young comic book fans who didn't really have much knowledge about the team before. I know that because I'm one of those young kids whose first impression of the Legion was through the show, and I'm honestly very nostalgic for it. In fact, I've always thought that one of the easiest things that DC could do to re-spark interest in the Legion again would simply be to relaunch its comic book title in a way that resembles the cartoon. Imagine if we got a new Legion comic book with Kal-El as its main protagonist, fully capitalizing on the nostalgia that people have for this cartoon. Superman X is an awesome character that deserves to be integrated into the main DC continuity, and is easily one of the most memorable aspects from this old show, so they could and should take advantage of that in my opinion. Please, DC, I'll even write the comic for you, just do it. So yeah, I really like Legion of Superheroes and I've always liked it, but what do you think about the show? What did you think about the unused planned Season 3 ideas? What characters that never showed up would you have liked to see? Personally, I've always thought they should have used Time Trapper. He's easily one of the coolest Legion villains from the comics. But please, let me know what you think in the comments below. And, as always, thank you so much for watching.